On the last episode of the Eccentric movement, we discussed how enterprises can get their XR strategy right with Rajan Anandan, Tobias Duschl, and of course, the Eccentric founders, which is Gaurav and me. On this episode, we get into an extended conversation with Tobi about his life, his work at Tesla, and his advice for automotive executives around the world. Let's jump right in. Someone who's been at the front line of tech disruption in the automotive space, Tobi, it's so nice to have you here. And we are so happy that today it's not just us at Eccentric who will benefit from your wisdom.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely, lovely. Well, Tobi, we'd love to understand your story. So let's begin with your formative years in Europe. Would you want to just share those with us?
Yeah, very happy. Very happy to share a bit. So yeah, my name is Tobi Duschl. I'm originally from Germany. Was born in the southeast of Germany in the countryside, right at the doorstep of BMW, actually. Lots of friends, parents commuted to the BMW factories in nearby towns. So it was always a very strong presence there. And I also started my professional career at BMW at the end of my undergrad. I studied economics and then started working at BMW in Munich at their headquarters, focused on research and development and then in-house consulting. From there, spent a few years in strategy consulting and economic consulting, while also pursuing my PhD in management and economics in Zurich. And then I oriented myself towards the US and finished up my graduate school at the UC Berkeley, and with that transplanted into the San Francisco Bay Area. So that was sort of a quick run through of my story up until my transplantation into the US.
Lovely. And of course, somewhere there came your eccentric moment where you joined Tesla. And I'm sure that that would be a really fascinating part of your life, right?
Yes, it was a very intense and very rich phase of my life. Yeah, I joined Tesla at the very early part of 2012. I went through my job interviews in 2011. The company had sold a little over 1,000 cars at that time. Very much on the rise still. Yeah, and then I joined at that really pivotal time before the Model S was launched, and I stayed with the company until we passed 500,000 customers worldwide, right? So it was just an incredibly accelerated, intense journey there. My focus was on building out the ecosystem for these amazing technology products, particularly the Model S and the Model X and the Model 3, to thrive in and to create a really holistic premium experience for customers. Right? That was an amazing playground. There were a lot of learnings. It had all to ramp very rapidly and to grow and evolve to be competitive in the set and to also complement a brand new technology. So it came with its challenges, right? We developed a global roadside assistance program before we had the first car on the road, right? We did not have a test car to train our operators with. We created a home charging installation program when most residential homes and especially multi-unit dwellings were not ready for this. We built business systems from the ground up when the business processes were just under definition. So a lot of this was really early stage for the company in this life cycle, and really building the structures that it then grew with and scaled with. And it's been really amazing to see how Tesla has evolved over the past years. It came with a very extreme learning curve. It was an amazing opportunity to work with very dedicated, very capable people. You build lifetime connections in that context. I work with a former coworker from Tesla now, again, in a new venture. And there's also really an interesting element of just learning how a vision can drive a large organization and really an industry forward. And that's something that is materializing now at every step, and obviously really fun to watch in various areas of the automotive industry and beyond, right? Really in the broader technology sector. So definitely something I'm very grateful for.
There's so much to unpack there, Toby. Just so much to unpack there because we know that the brand that we see is, of course, the largest market cap in the automotive industry. Uh, Not really much more than a decade ago was actually a startup. And I think that's a huge inspiration for a lot of companies out there to say that, yeah, that you can dream. So how was it to take Tesla from zero to one? Because you mentioned about you being one of the early members of the team there. So can you walk us through that phase of zero to one for Tesla?
Yeah, I mean, it was just as I indicated earlier, right? Joining at the before the launch of the Model S, joining at about 1,000 cars on the road globally. We had a global footprint of maybe 15 locations, half of which were sales locations, half of which were service locations, and that grew into a footprint of supporting 500,000 customers 24/7, ensuring that we had a footprint in every country that we supported. It was over 300 sites that were then operated. There was an entire software suite developed to operate everything from strategic planning to supply chain to the manufacturing operations and the after sales operations. That was one of the most exciting projects and products I was able to work on to really build the infrastructure for this tremendous scale. And with that comes obviously an incredible ramp up in talent that had to be onboarded, process depth to support the various capabilities that you need to implement to support the ownership experience, to support the vehicles running smoothly, to provide very rapid feedback so that the innovation also takes into consideration what the latest customer experience is. And then really building out the ecosystem around the product, right? That definitely was one of the key lessons. You need to be able to support not just the driver sitting in the driver's seat, accelerating the car and steering the car, but you need to think about any other contingency that might happen. Yeah, the vehicle might break down. The vehicle needs to be charged. You might want to elevate the multimedia experience. You might want to elevate the shopping experience. You think about how do you make that a very immersive experience? How do you build a closer connection between the physical product and, for example, a virtual representation of the product, right? So there's just tremendous potential there, and there was a lot of trailblazing that happened across the board in every area, and it was very exciting to be a part of that journey.
Think one thing that we always speak about is time. There is so much to do, and there's only so much little time that we have. And to think of it, when you had to build an entire ecosystem, within a short amount of time, would take something superhuman. And what would your advice be to an ambitious, executive working in an automotive enterprise who is looking to really change the way things are done? What kind of inspiration can they draw from the Tesla way of doing things?
Yeah, one thing that I was just really impressed by from the start at Tesla, and definitely that was very much represented by Elon as the leader at Tesla, was this relentless focus on the vision for the company and why that was a valuable um, objective to go after, and why sacrifice for this objective was very worthwhile, right? It definitely drowned out a lot of the doubts and the pain and the challenges that came with the day-to-day operation, when you realize that what you're actually doing is you're creating the best automotive and transportation and energy experience and the best impact that a company in this field can have, and you can really be a origin and you can be a multiplier for an entire industry to uh, look up and to acknowledge and to respect and maybe even to follow and innovate through that through that progress that you can drive with the work that you're doing. And that obviously makes everything a bit easier to do even under the most strenuous circumstances. So that was one thing. I think a very strong vision, a very clear understanding of the why of what you're doing, and the very relentless pursuit of always focusing on the most important thing and on the right thing to enable that. Those are things. They're very foundational, but they really are what I took away as some of the strongest impressions during my time there.
I hear you speak about the impact, right? The fact that, if you are embarking on any big mission, it's just so important to really manifest what you are chasing. How will success look like? And how will the world change once you become successful? And I can completely imagine. Sorry, I can't imagine. Really being in one of those, conference rooms or meeting rooms where Elon is giving a pep talk in the early days of Tesla about why this is a problem that needs to be solved. Uh, for our viewers, if you had to give them, if they had to be fly on the wall retrospectively in one of those meetings, how did those meetings look like?
There was a wide variety of these meetings. Obviously, they had all kinds of connotations. Sometimes happy, sometimes not so happy. Sometimes stressful, sometimes very stressful. There was definitely always a very clear forward motion. One thing that I definitely also took away, and I think that's sort of a byproduct of this relentless focus on a clear vision and a why, and that striving to achieve that goal, was that um, there wasn't much variation of the goals over time. I spent a little over 7 years at Tesla, which from the outside, you have to clarify, right? 7 years during this transformational period, the company really morphed from one type of company to another type of company in a 6 to 12 month tact, and it just was a continuous evolution of the organization, of the number of people, the types of functions, and the types of individuals that you worked with. So there was a lot of change internally as was there externally. And during that time, what was very clear was that the vision always remained a very strong and clear one, and that the philosophy with which we pursued the goals that we had set out remained the same. So we talked about the same elevated customer experience basically in the first meeting that I had with Elon, as well as in the last meeting that I had with Elon. It was a very consistent focus on basically the ultimate goal. And I think that was something that definitely was counterintuitive and surprising to me, also having worked in the startup environment and also knowing how difficult it is to stay steady and to focus. Um, and that was one of the things that I took away as very inspirational, to keep that focus, to be relentless there, and to also not force yourself to reinvent yourself all the time, but actually keep an even keel and just execute towards the things that are most important to you. And that I think is also part of why Tesla is so successful.
Right. And I'm sure that all of us are, even more curious to understand, what's the kind of energy that Elon rubbed off you? How was it overall working like the man himself? And was it intimidating? Was it, yeah, so how was that experience if we had to sum up just the Elon experience? Because I know there's a Tesla experience and then there is the Elon experience. So how would you really sum that up?
Yeah, and I obviously can only speak to my limited range and the friends of mine that shared their experiences with me. I was able to meet with Elon very early on during my tenure. I presented a software product that we had developed with an amazing team in a very short period of time. I had the chance to share that with him. It was a really fascinating interaction at first, and then we had many interactions following that over the years. And one thing that always stuck out was he was extremely focused, very clear with his vision, and very vocal about his asks and the demands, right? He was very clear, this is what has to happen. Um, and you realize that it was this continuous forward, upward motion that made things never easy. It was never one day was the same as the next, but the uh, whatever stress came with that and whatever sacrifice came with that, when you really believed in the vision and the inspiration that you drew from that, that definitely outweighed that sacrifice, right? And for him personally, I think a few things that really stuck out. He's extremely detail oriented and competent in the details, and really across the board, from the product to the customer experience to the outside ecosystem. Extremely knowledgeable. He built a world class team, and it was just a privilege to meet so many very interested and engaged and excited individuals that were willing to put in all their energy into this project. And that's something that I also, when I look around, I just see how that inspires a large generation of technology companies now, where a lot of the former Tesla staff is now all over the world in all kinds of technology companies and driving innovation. And that's just a beautiful thing to see. And then he was definitely one of the most customer obsessed people I've ever met. And that was also very inspirational, just to think about giving the customer the best and never stopping to think about what is a better version of the product tomorrow than what you delivered yesterday, and really pushing an entire organization and an entire ecosystem to constantly improve itself and improve themselves. That was certainly impressive and definitely also left an imprint on me that, yeah, I'll definitely draw inspiration from for a long time.
So for all the automotive leaders who are watching this show, I think one thing that they can gain an immense satisfaction and pride from is that one of the greatest human beings of our generation, is also an automotive leader. So it's just great to really think of it that way, and I'm sure it just gives a different level of significance to what they do, because principally their job is to create a great customer experience, and that's what they all live on. And on that note, how let's just focus on the automotive leader. Could be a chief marketing officer, a chief digital officer, head of customer experience, and so on and so forth. How is their job different from their counterparts in the other industries?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in itself the auto industry is unique when you look at how important of a role the product plays in everyday life for the customer, and also how diverse the demands are towards the product. The product, the car, is transportation, it's a safety device, it's a multimedia hub, it's a source of joy. It's so many different things for the consumer. And that just makes it an incredibly intriguing um, product and industry to work in. So it's also no surprise that one of the most brilliant inventors and entrepreneurs decided to work in the automotive industry. It is just an incredibly fascinating industry. I think for leaders in that sector, in the automotive sector, it poses very specific challenges. You need to mind all the aspects of the customer experience. You need to always think about how do you deliver a superior solution. Competition is very strong. It is very challenging to keep innovating, but also at a high quality level. And you always need to think about the customer journey, because wherever you miss out, you may drop something and you may risk being competitive. You may risk the brand value, and it's high stakes at that point. So that is something that is, I think, day to day, night by night, very important for any leader in the automotive sector, to think about this holistically and think about what is the customer journey, how does the product experience merge with the customer journey, and how do you think about this holistically. And I think that also makes the scope for automotive leaders gigantic, because you always have to have this comprehensive vision. And then obviously it brings a lot of opportunity, because there are a ton of examples of how you can mind the entire customer journey, right? From a very immersive product exploration, from a easy access to experience the look and the feel of the car, for any after sales touch points to make sure that the experience and the ownership is very seamless. And then there can be a lot of innovation in those areas. And there's just fascinating stuff happening with 3D visualization, with machine learning in vehicle inspection. There's endless innovation happening as a result, as a virtue of that customer journey being so comprehensive and so critical. And I think that's also one of the things why it stays so fascinating to work in this industry.
I think super interesting. And just to give it a little bit more of a dimension, right? Compared to Tesla, an average automotive brand has way many more products, so many more trims, and so many more opportunities to really create great experiences. Because so I think, and hence the point of product experience that you made is just so much more vital. Now, just deep diving into the product experience for an automotive brand, right? Of course, we've spoken about it, and there are various ways of making it come alive. But if we have to dissect this product experience for an automotive leader today, how should they look at it, and what is your thesis on that?
Yeah, I think, sort of connecting to my earlier point, from my perspective, the product experience in automotive is everything from the initial exposure to the product during discovery through to the first use of the car, which is a very special moment. And then the most mundane product interactions that you have on a daily basis, where whatever interaction you have with the product, it may be a positive or negative one, it influences your customer journey, and it influences how you feel about your purchase and about what you might do next time around when you make that choice, right? So it's a very comprehensive perspective, and the product experience really through that becomes a comprehensive problem to keep in mind and to solve. And I think with that, you also need to make sure that your strategy covers that end-to-end journey, and only then it can be really immersive, and you can really ensure that a customer enjoys seamlessly that they decided for your product. I think that's really foundational for the brand value over time. And as we're progressing with digitization in our lives, there's obviously more and more elements of digital interactions that come with your car. So there's even an extension of that ownership experience into the digital realm that is certainly coming up now, and is going to be heavily leveraged across all touch points that we have with the digital world already. So I think there will be a continued dynamic there and a continued evolution. And it is obviously one full of potential and full of opportunity, and there will be a lot of exciting developments in the coming years for sure.
So true, so true. And just to speak about a certain kind of policy here, very often do you hear automotive leaders looking at product experience through just the launch of the next model or the next vehicle, saying, "Oh, I have this new product coming up, and what's the kind of experience that I can actually create for that?" And I would imagine that as people, while we won't call ourselves experts, but as people who cater to this industry, we often wish that there was an ecosystem level thinking to the product experience problem. And as someone who has not just made an ecosystem, but multiple ecosystems for an automotive brand, what are your thoughts on an ecosystem level thinking to solve a complex problem?
Yeah, I think one exciting aspect about this is there's certainly sort of the risk of incrementality in the perspective where you don't really think about how to reinvent yourself, but you think about how do I uh, grow into the next model and the next iteration of maybe a successful model, and then you have these small increments of adjustments. I do see one really interesting trend in the last, I would say, 10 years, and certainly also uh, Tesla being a strong catalyst of that. As you're looking at electrification, a very new, very dramatic shift is introduced, and a lot of reinvention has to happen at the foundational level. And you see a lot of very traditional manufacturers that suddenly completely reinvent entire segments of their fleet. And I think that is actually a really exciting uh, subject of study almost when you think about what can you learn from that when very established automotive manufacturers that have been very successful for a long time, when they completely reinvent themselves, build entirely new vehicle platforms that need entirely new ecosystems to support, they rethink their marketing strategy, their support strategy, their even long-term fleet strategy. There's a lot of exciting things happening, and there's some innovation just in the last 10 years that has happened that changes from this model to model thinking, and you're actually seeing paradigm shifts happening even within OEMs, not just across OEMs. So I think that also has a long breath. There will continue to be lots of movement there, and hopefully that also will unlock more opportunities to make everything, yeah, more exciting, better experience, and more sustainable in the long run as well.
Super interesting, super interesting. And I think on that note, right, just to really help understand it, if an enterprise has to give a certain time span to creating ecosystems for developing a great product experience, would you advise them thinking months, thinking years? And if it is years, how many years?
So, from my experience in this challenge of establishing new ecosystems around very amazing products, right? You're really standing on the shoulders of giants of amazing products, and then you get to develop an ecosystem around them with the responsibility that you can really uh, interfere with the effectiveness of the product, with the experience around the product, if that ecosystem does not succeed. I would definitely say that it is a matter of years, but every month and every increment and every iteration that you make counts, right? Because you may not land a perfect setup in the first few months, but focusing on the right things and getting them done well is going to really move the needle. And for example, we had a lot of grace also from the early stage customers at Tesla when it was clear that not all the structures were fully developed, and we just had to do what we could as fast as possible to catch up. And it was always clear that it was going to be an effort that was worth years and not months or weeks, right? And so I think it really is the longer term perspective that is winning, and at the same time, you just need to figure out how to prioritize and how to crunch the timelines on the things that matter most. And I think that also is going to be a continued differentiator between very successful and not so successful companies in this space, right? The company that really understands to tie together the long-term vision with a very strong short-term execution and prioritization of those milestones will always outperform anyone else that is trying to succeed and may just be based on a good idea, right? Execution still very much matters there.
And right, and just to unpack what you said, it's like about giving these programs a multi-year vision, where of course you're not, you're planning at least 2-3 years down the line, and yet having a really solid enforcement and measurement mechanism to make sure that your short-term goals are being achieved, and at least the hypothesis that you're building, at every single level is working fine. So it's about having having the right vision, which extends into multiple years, with a lot of close monitoring, optimization, so that eventually you get there. So it's almost like operating a startup, right? So fair to say that the leaders in an automotive enterprise today who are gunning to create great customer experiences, um, in many ways behave like an agile startup, which needs to achieve things within a certain runway and certain resources.
Very much so, yes.
Just speaking about foundational tech and how much significance foundational tech had into shaping what Tesla is today, I'm sure our viewers would love to know what were some of the decisions that you guys made in early years of Tesla to ditch conventional tech in favor of foundational tech? Well, I've read about couple of things like batteries and everything else, but would love to know from you. Again, the question is to inspire a lot of companies around the world that experiment with foundational tech, because that's where your next innovation will come from. So, Toby, what are your observations there?
Yeah, from my perspective, Tesla remains one of the brightest examples when it comes to focusing on foundational technology, and from there, then emphasizing a high performance solution and a thriving ecosystem around it. And before Tesla, there were various EV models that failed, maybe due to institutional barriers, maybe it was more the lack of aspirational industry leading performance. And that definitely also has played a role, right? If on top of that, there isn't a broad supportive ecosystem to fall back on to support the experience, then it's tough to compete with strong incumbents that have that model dialed in. For Tesla, there was just always a hardcore focus on the engineering side of a top performance product, right? From the battery pack, the battery chemistry, the architecture of the vehicle, the performance elements of the vehicle, drivetrain, down to minor components, everything from door handles to the center display, that were designed with a meticulous focus on what is an outstanding experience and performance, and how do we wrap all this together into one vehicle product and one vehicle experience. Some of them not necessarily successful, right? So there were attempts that also were challenging and turned into, you focused on performance and got failure, and those examples definitely are there as well. But all in all, I would say there's a lot of inspiration coming from this attitude, from the bravery, right, and the guts that it takes to focus on the foundational tech, and then with the aspiration to create the highest performing, um, and really well embedded in a thriving ecosystem product. That is what I think has been a big differentiator in the history of Tesla, and I'm really hoping to see that also for Eccentric, right? To see the focus on performance, the focus on scalability, and then bringing from that foundational tech, bringing substantial business value for the customer and then for the OEMs. I think that's really the path ahead, and I'm super excited to witness that.
Thanks a lot for joining us. Until the next episode, goodbye from all of us at Eccentric.